Haunted Motel Experience. My husband and 5-year-old daughter were looking for a cheap place to stay the night of Sunday night. The room was your basic motel room for $80 a night. We all relaxed and fell asleep probably by 11. My husband said he woke up with a dream that there was a female 30 to 40 years old watching him from the full-length mirror that was on the wall across from the bed. He woke up and looked in the mirror, and there was a girl there. He got up, walked to the bathroom, figuring he was still dreaming, and when he came back out, she was still there and slowly faded away. He could not sleep after that, and went across the street to Sheetz for a coffee. When he got back to the room, he saw a little girl about our daughter's age on the side of her bed. She would go away, but every time my husband took his eyes off her or left the room, the little girl would be back by our daughter. By 4 a.m., the little girl was standing over my daughter and would not go away. My husband was completely freaked out and woke me up saying that we needed to leave the room that instant. I've never seen him so freaked out. I hurried up and packed and left. I didn't see anything in the room. The only strange thing is that I was extremely exhausted yesterday even though I slept most of the night. My husband has seen things before, but he said this really freaked him out. He said he got the sense that the older girl and the little kid were not together. I've been trying to Google hauntings at this motel, and it doesn't seem like there is any other reports of this. Anyone know how to find if there were suicides or something that might confirm what my husband saw at the motel? Thanks. Disembodied arm in my bed. As a kid, I was scared out of my mind by the dark. When I would sleep, I would hide underneath the covers and just leave a little hole for air. Well, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I was in bed one night and I moved my hand, and underneath the sheets in my bed was the forearm of what felt like an adult man. I was an only child raised by a single mother, so there wasn't anyone in the house who could have been. I was unbelievably freaked out, and I was too scared to get out of bed and get my mom. By the way, it didn't touch me or move at all, it was just there. Now, my little 7-year-old brain tried to rationalize all of this. At the time, I had a 3-foot-tall Bugs Bunny stuffed animal. I went at a carnival or something. It was leaned up against my dresser and about 3 feet from my bed. I just told myself that Bugs had just fallen over, and that's what I felt. I forced myself to sleep, and woke up in the morning, and Bugs was exactly where he had been the day before. No one broke into the house. Nothing was out of the ordinary. I didn't mention the experience to my mom or anyone else, and just tried to forget about it. Now, about 10 years later, I was talking to my mom about creepy stories, and she told me about this time she was moving back to California from Michigan when she was about 8 or 9 years old, and they were staying in a motel along the way. It was the middle of the night, and she was awake, and she moved her arm, and felt the forearm of an adult man in the bed. She was telling me that at the time, she thought it was my grandfather's arm, but he was in a different bed, and she heard him winding his watch when it happened. I don't know what this was or how to explain 2 family members having similar experiences, almost 35 years apart, in different parts of the country. I'm not the sensitive type, and neither is my mother, and I tend to look for a scientific explanation before I jump to paranormal ones. As a skeptic, here are my experiences. Now, anyone around here who recognizes my name around here probably knows I'm a pretty vocal skeptic. I haven't been that active around here due to the influx of very obvious fiction and requests for supernatural and spiritual advice, which I'm of the opinion have no place when discussing the paranormal, a scientific term used to categorize experiences that are outside of the mundane, things that fall outside of science as we know it, but their existence being acknowledged by this term. In other words, I believe that this should be a place where we look at these phenomena with a scientific, objective eye, and not get defensive when someone tries to dig a little deeper into the stories posted here. But that's neither here nor there. This sub will never be that place, as much as I wish it could be, but I'm still drawn back here every now and again. Why? To be a judgmental prick who calls people liars and make them question their own sanity? Of course not. I'm simply a person who is drawn to the field because, as rational and mundane as I like to think I am, I've still had personal experiences that I cannot explain. Anyways, I'm tired of rambling, so I'll just get to describing those experiences in no particular order. Number 1. Night of my great-grandfather's death. Sitting in my room reading alone, door closed, I hear a loud splash from my waterbed. As if someone sat down on it. I see the waves. Dog is tied up outside. I check, and the cat is sleeping in her bed. Number 2. Driving through northern Ontario with my family on a road trip. We're on an overpass crossing some railroad tracks, and I gaze down them. I see a figure, large and brown, going alongside the tracks. My first thought that it's someone in a big brown winter jacket biking while standing up, but it was winter, and there was probably 5 to 6 feet of snow on the ground down there. Moose is a possibility, but I grew up in rural Ontario, so I feel confident saying that it wasn't a moose. Number 3. Nothing too exciting here, but I was standing on the balcony of my motel room while in a decently populated area. I saw a bright orange light, not unlike a dulled Venus, making its way across the horizon. Then, another from the opposite direction. They met, and both quickly shot up. Number 4. On a date with my fiancé, we're looking at the gravestones in a cemetery. In particular, I was looking for a great uncle of mine, so I was examining any stones with my last name. We got to the old section of the cemetery, and I wiped some moss off of one that was a century old. I felt a very firm grasp on my shoulder, followed by a tug. I turned around, assuming my fiancé had found something interesting and was getting my attention, but she was a few stones over in the other direction. I looked at the stone I had just wiped, and it had my last name. It then immediately started pouring rain on an otherwise clear day. We took shelter under a tree, and it was all over in a few short minutes. Number 5. Jean-Luc Picard visited me in my sleep. This one I have an explanation for, but I thought it might be interesting given how often this pops up around here. I was very sick when I was younger, and was drifting in and out of an exhausted sleep. I eventually woke up and, attempting to get out of bed and go to the bathroom, I couldn't move. I couldn't open my eyes fully. The most of my voice could muster was a peep of that shrill little sound one makes when they've lost their voices. Yes, it was sleep paralysis, and I just happened to have the Space Channel on. It was running an episode of TNG, except in my mind, that episode was taking place quite literally in my room behind my back. I like to think that being able to focus on Star Trek for nearly an hour saved me from what could have been a terrifying experience if I allowed myself to wander, my mind to wander, actually. Number 6. The White Thing. Years ago, a few people around my neighborhood began mentioning seeing something in the bush. A tall, gaunt person, not wearing anything, sprinting, just out of sight. Also of note was that the overpowering smell. Homeless people are rare around here, but not unheard of, so I chalked it up to that, until I smelt it for myself. I once had the pleasure of throwing out a freezer full of bad beef after it had failed. It was overpowering and eye-watering. What I smelled while walking down the road trivialized that experience. It was the smell of rotting flesh, amplified many times over. I actually ran with my dog in the opposite direction to get away from it. Years later, as I was exploring my heritage, I mentioned this to an elder, and he hesitantly explained the legend of the Wendigo to me. It syncs up with what I and others experienced quite well. Now, aside from the sleep paralysis, I cannot explain a single one of these incidences rationally. That's not for a lack of trying. I've potentially made the trifecta, hitting the ghost, Bigfoot, and UFO phenomena, but again, I cannot be certain of what I've seen, given how it doesn't match up with the rest of my worldview. and that's what draws me to the subject like a moth to a flame. Any other skeptics out there care to share experiences they've had that cannot explain themselves? And yes, I know this is a meandering post, but I'm sleep deprived and not exactly focused. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. P.S. As an Ojibwe man, please think before trying to use sage or any other medicines as a miracle cure-all for the paranormal. It doesn't work like that. It is the belief in a ritual that gives it power. If you do not understand what you are doing or respect the reasons behind it, there is no point. It's like someone cheating on their spouse and trying to cleanse themselves of guilt by eating a cracker and having a shot of wine. Mimicking the literal steps of it is pointless. Just as using sacred medicines just because some Indians or other cultures do.